The lies that keep you small, stop. Before you read another word of generic advice about believing in yourself or thinking positive thoughts, you need to hear something that most people are too afraid to say out loud. Everything you've been taught about confidence is wrong. Not slightly off, not missing a few details, completely, fundamentally wrong. And the proof is sitting right in front of you. If the conventional wisdom worked, the affirmations, the power poses, the fake it till you make it, then why are millions of intelligent, capable, hard-working Americans still waking up every morning feeling like they're one step away from being exposed as a fraud? Why are talented people sitting silently in meetings while less capable colleagues dominate the room? Why are driven, ambitious individuals paralyzed at the exact moments that matter most? Because they were handed a broken map. Real confidence, the kind that makes a room shift the moment you walk into it, the kind that makes people instinctively trust your judgment before you've said a single word, is not about how you feel. It is not about telling yourself comforting stories in the mirror. It is not a personality trait you're either born with or permanently denied. Confidence is a skill, a learnable, buildable, systematic skill that operates according to specific psychological laws. Once you understand those laws, once you see the architecture beneath the surface, everything changes. This is not a book about motivation. Motivation is temporary. This is a book about installation, about permanently rewiring the psychological operating system that governs how you move through the world. By the time you finish this, you will not think about confidence the same way ever again. But first, we need to destroy the lies. Lie number 1, confidence comes from positive thinking. This is perhaps the most psychologically destructive piece of advice ever mass-marketed to the American public. The idea that repeating affirmations, "I am strong, I am worthy, I deserve success," somehow transforms internal chemistry is not just ineffective, it actively makes things worse. Here is the mechanism. When you try to convince yourself of something your subconscious already knows is false, your brain doesn't cooperate, it recognizes the lie, not through logic, but through the deep pattern recognition systems that have been tracking your actual behavior and actual results for your entire life. The result is not increased confidence, it's increased internal conflict. A war between the story you're trying to sell yourself and the evidence your subconscious has compiled over years. Real confidence doesn't come from positive thinking. It comes from proof, from a track record of showing up in difficult situations and coming through them. Your subconscious doesn't care what story you tell it. It cares about the data. Feed it evidence of capability, and confidence follows naturally, automatically, without any affirmation required. Lie number 2, truly confident people don't feel fear. This myth is responsible for trapping more capable people in smaller lives than almost any other belief. The assumption goes, if I were truly confident, I wouldn't feel nervous before a big presentation. I wouldn't feel anxiety before a difficult conversation. I wouldn't feel that familiar tightening in my chest before I step into a high-stakes situation. So, when fear shows up, and it always shows up, people interpret it as evidence of inadequacy. I'm not ready yet. I need to work on myself more before I take this step. And they wait, and wait, and nothing happens. Here is the truth. Genuinely confident people feel fear constantly. The executives who command rooms feel it. The entrepreneurs who build companies from scratch feel it. The leaders who make decisions that affect thousands of lives feel it. The difference between them and everyone else is not the presence or absence of fear. It's what they do with it. Fear never goes away completely. You either learn to move through it or you stay exactly where you are. Lie number 3. Confidence means believing you can do anything. This sounds inspiring. It's actually a psychological trap. When you tie your confidence to a belief in universal capability, I can do anything I set my mind to, you create an impossible standard. The first time you fail, the first time you fall short of that standard, the entire structure collapses. Real confidence is something more durable and more honest than that. It's not certainty that you'll succeed at every attempt. It's certainty that you can figure things out as you go. It's knowing that even when you walk into situations where you don't have all the answers, don't have all the skills, don't know exactly how it will end, you have the psychological tools to adapt, to learn, to recover, and to keep moving forward. That's a belief you can actually build, and it cannot be dismantled by a single failure, because failure becomes just another thing to figure out. Lie number 4. Fake it till you make it is a legitimate strategy. It isn't. It's a recipe for chronic psychological stress dressed up as advice. When you perform confidence you don't feel, your entire nervous system is constantly occupied with one terrifying question: am I about to be found out? That vigilance, that constant background monitoring, scanning every reaction for signs that the facade is cracking, is the polar opposite of what genuine confidence feels like. Real confidence is unconscious. When you're genuinely confident, you're not thinking about whether you appear confident any more than you think about whether your heart is beating. It's simply happening. You're present, engaged, responding, not performing. People sense the difference, not always consciously. But something feels off around someone who is managing an image rather than inhabiting an identity. The indefinable sensation you get in the presence of authentic confidence versus manufactured confidence is not subtle. It registers immediately, below the level of language. The reason all 4 of these lies share a common flaw is this: they all focus on managing how you feel rather than building who you actually are. They treat symptoms while leaving the root cause completely untouched. True confidence is not emotional management. It is genuine capability, honestly assessed, built through real experience, expressed without performance. That is what this book is about. The neuroscience of unshakable certainty. To build confidence that nothing can touch, you need to understand what is actually happening inside your brain when confidence either activates or collapses. Because confidence isn't a mindset, it's a neurological event. Your brain operates through 2 primary systems that determine, moment to moment, whether you show up with presence and certainty or shrink behind anxiety and self-doubt. The first is your limbic system, ancient, fast, and powerful. It evolved over millions of years with one singular mission: keep you alive. It doesn't think, it reacts. It processes threats at a speed far beyond conscious awareness and floods your body with stress hormones designed to prepare you for fight, flight, or freeze. The second is your prefrontal cortex, the seat of everything that makes you distinctly human. Planning, judgment, creative thinking, the ability to choose your response rather than simply react to a stimulus. Here is the problem. Your limbic system doesn't distinguish between a situation that is genuinely dangerous and a situation that merely feels dangerous. It responds to a salary negotiation with the same urgency it would bring to encountering a threat in the wilderness. Heart rate spikes. Cortisol floods the system. The prefrontal cortex begins to go offline. And that's when it falls apart. Not because you're not smart enough or skilled enough or prepared enough, but because your most sophisticated cognitive systems are functionally unavailable. You're operating on ancient survival wiring in a modern context where survival instincts are actively counterproductive. Dangerous confidence happens when you've trained your brain to correctly categorize social and professional challenges as non-threatening. When your limbic system stays calm, your prefrontal cortex stays fully online. When it stays online, you have access to everything: your full intelligence, your creativity, your interpersonal intelligence, your ability to read a room and respond with precision. The mechanism that makes this possible is called neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to physically rewire itself based on experience. Every time you face a challenging situation and navigate it successfully, you build new neural pathways, literal physical structures in your brain that encode one message. This type of situation is manageable. Over time, with enough repetitions, those pathways become the default response. Situations that once triggered panic begin to feel routine. Environments that once felt threatening begin to feel familiar. Every time you avoid a difficult situation, the opposite happens. The neural pathways encoding danger get reinforced. The gap between where you are and where you want to be widens. This is why exposure is the single most powerful tool in confidence building. Not thinking about facing your fears, not visualizing facing your fears, actually incrementally, systematically facing them. But the key word is incrementally. The most common mistake people make when they finally commit to building confidence is going too far, too fast. They decide that to overcome social anxiety, they'll force themselves into the most terrifying social situation imaginable. They decide that to become comfortable with public speaking, they'll sign up to present to 100 people before they've ever spoken to 10. This almost always backfires. Overwhelming your nervous system doesn't build tolerance. It reinforces the neural pathways that code the experience as catastrophic. The science behind effective confidence building is called progressive exposure combined with stress inoculation. You start just outside your comfort zone, not in the terror zone, not in the safety zone, but in the productive discomfort zone where growth actually occurs. You build competence there until it becomes comfort. Then you expand the boundary again. Each successful navigation at a new level of challenge accomplishes two things simultaneously. It builds genuine skill, and it updates your brain's threat assessment. I thought this would destroy me. It didn't. I can handle this. Stack enough of those experiences and you have built something no affirmation can manufacture: evidence. There is one more neurological piece worth understanding: dopamine. Often mislabeled as the pleasure chemical, dopamine is more accurately the anticipation chemical. It fires not when you receive a reward, but when you expect one. And your brain's expectations are shaped entirely by your history. When you have a track record of showing up, attempting things, and succeeding, even in small ways, your brain learns to expect positive outcomes. Dopamine flows. You feel motivated, energized, oriented toward possibility. When your track record is one of avoidance and retreat, your brain learns to expect negative outcomes. Dopamine is suppressed. Everything feels heavier. Even the thought of trying triggers a low-grade dread. This is why small wins matter so much in the early stages of building confidence. Not because the wins themselves are significant, but because each one is a deposit into the account of positive expectation. And that account, once it reaches a certain level, begins to compound on its own. Installing your new operating system. Understanding the neuroscience is the diagnosis. Now comes the treatment. Building limitless confidence requires installing a completely new psychological operating system, one that generates certainty automatically across any situation, regardless of external conditions. This system has 4 core components, each of which supports and amplifies the others. Component 1: competence stacking, the foundation of everything. Not self-esteem, not mindset work. Actual, verifiable, demonstrable competence in areas that matter. Here is the insight most confidence programs miss entirely. Your subconscious cannot argue with genuine capability. When you know, not believe, not hope, but know that you are excellent at something, confidence in that domain becomes automatic. You don't have to manufacture it. You don't have to maintain it. It simply exists, as naturally as knowledge that you can drive a car or speak your native language. Competence stacking works like this. Identify the specific domains where confidence matters most in your life, not vague categories like work or relationships. Specific contexts where the gap between who you are now and who you want to be is most visible and most costly. For each domain, reverse engineer the specific skills that genuinely confident, genuinely effective people in that context possess. Not the surface behaviors, but the underlying capabilities. In professional settings, this might include clear and precise communication, the ability to think strategically under time pressure, facility with conflict resolution, and the command of your subject matter that makes you the person others turn to when clarity is needed. Then develop each competency through deliberate practice, focused, systematic, feedback-driven practice. Not casual improvement, but the kind of intentional skill building that produces measurable results. You don't develop all competencies simultaneously. You pick one. You focus on it with full intensity until you reach genuine mastery, not theoretical understanding, but the kind of fluency that comes from repeated performance under real conditions. Then you move to the next. The compounding effect of this process is extraordinary. Each competency you develop not only builds confidence in its specific domain, it also builds the meta-competency of capability development itself. You begin to know that you can become excellent at things because you have done it repeatedly, and that knowledge is itself one of the most potent forms of confidence available. Component 2. Social calibration. The ability to read social environments with accuracy and respond to them with precision. Most confidence problems are not actually confidence problems. They're social calibration problems. People struggle in social and professional situations not because they lack capability, but because they're operating on incomplete or distorted information about what is actually happening around them. Social calibration is the skill of seeing social dynamics clearly. Who holds power in a given environment, how that power is being exercised, what the unspoken rules governing interactions are, what people are actually communicating beneath the surface of what they're saying. This skill develops through focused, intentional observation. You begin paying deliberate attention to dynamics that most people pass through without noticing. Who speaks first in a meeting? Who gets interrupted and who never does? Who do people look at for approval when a decision is being made? How does the energy in a group change when different individuals enter the room? You study high-status, genuinely confident individuals with the focused attention of a researcher. Not to copy their specific behaviors, but to extract the underlying principles of how they navigate social environments, how they manage disagreement without becoming defensive, how they hold attention without demanding it, how they recover from awkward moments without making those moments into events. The destination is this: social awareness sharp enough that you are rarely caught genuinely off guard. When you can accurately read what is happening, uncertainty dissolves, and with uncertainty gone, much of what presents as confidence failure, the hesitation, the over-explanation, the anxious monitoring of how you're being received, disappears along with it. Component 3. Emotional regulation. The ability to maintain a chosen internal state, regardless of external conditions. Most people's confidence is entirely dependent on circumstances. When things go well, when they're praised, when situations feel familiar and controllable, confidence is accessible. When they face criticism, unexpected challenges, or high-pressure environments, it evaporates. Dangerous confidence means your internal state is substantially independent of external events. You remain centered and capable whether you're receiving a standing ovation or a pointed critique, whether you're in familiar territory or navigating completely unknown waters. This is not emotional suppression. You still feel everything. The difference is that emotions inform your responses rather than dictating them. Emotional regulation is developed through three primary mechanisms. The first is breath control, the single fastest way to influence your physiological state. Controlled diaphragmatic breathing directly activates the parasympathetic nervous system, which creates the calm, clear, present state that is the physiological home of genuine confidence. This isn't a metaphor. It's a measurable change in neurochemistry, accessible within seconds, available in any situation. The second is cognitive reframing, changing the meaning you assign to events without changing the events themselves. Challenges become tests of capability rather than threats to survival. Criticism becomes data for improvement rather than indictment of character. Failure becomes a component of the learning process rather than evidence of permanent inadequacy. The third is exposure conditioning, systematically encountering situations that trigger emotional reactivity, building tolerance through repeated intentional contact with discomfort. Component 4. Reality architecture. The ability to shape the social environment you're in rather than simply adapting to it. When the first three components are working, when you have genuine competence, accurate social calibration, and stable emotional regulation, something emerges that psychologists call presence. You stop being someone who reacts to the social world. You begin to be someone who creates it. You walk into a room and the energy organizes around you. Not because you're performing or posturing, but because the quality of your attention, the clarity of your purpose, and the stability of your internal state create a field that other people feel and orient toward. This is not manipulation. It is the natural expression of genuine inner certainty projected into social space. And it cannot be faked. It can only be built from the inside out through the systematic development of everything that precedes it. Dismantling self-doubt permanently. Self-doubt is not a character flaw. It is a sophisticated psychological defense system, one that your brain developed to protect you from the devastating social consequences of failure in environments where those consequences were, for most of human history, genuinely catastrophic. Understanding its architecture is the first step in dismantling it. Self-doubt operates through 5 primary cognitive distortions, each of which takes a genuine possibility, something that could actually happen, and transforms it into an inevitable certainty that justifies inaction. Catastrophizing is the automatic escalation of any potential negative outcome to its most extreme form. You're preparing for a presentation at work, and your brain doesn't say, "This might go poorly." It says, "This will be a disaster. You will humiliate yourself. You will lose credibility. The professional consequences will be severe and lasting. Your career arc will change permanently." Every step in that chain might represent a real possibility. But self-doubt treats the most extreme outcome in the chain as the probable outcome, and uses that probability as grounds for avoidance. Mind reading is the assumption that you have accurate knowledge of what others are thinking, combined with the additional assumption that what they're thinking is negative. A colleague doesn't respond to your message immediately. They must be annoyed with you. A client seems distracted during a call. They must be losing confidence in you. Someone doesn't laugh at something you said. They must find you unimpressive. The reality is that you have essentially zero access to other people's internal states, and the vast majority of their behavior is driven by their own concerns, not by their assessment of you. But self-doubt fills the ambiguity with the worst available interpretation, every time. Fortune-telling is certainty about negative outcomes that haven't occurred yet. Not, I might not get this job, but I won't get this job. Not, this conversation might be difficult, but this conversation will end badly. And then, this is the part that makes it particularly insidious, using that invented certainty as grounds for not trying at all. Personalization is taking responsibility for outcomes that have little or nothing to do with you. Someone is in a bad mood and you assume you caused it. A project runs into difficulties and you absorb the entirety of the blame, ignoring the multiple factors outside your control. A conversation is awkward and you decide it means something definitive about your social competence. This distortion gives the illusion of control. If I caused it, I can prevent it next time, while generating enormous amounts of unnecessary guilt and self-criticism. All-or-nothing thinking is the elimination of nuance. You either performed brilliantly or you failed completely. You are either competent or incompetent. You either belong here or you don't. This cognitive structure makes any experience that falls short of perfect evidence of total failure, which means that the inevitable imperfections of any real performance become sources of self-doubt rather than simply parts of a normal human process. Dismantling these patterns requires what psychologists call cognitive diffusion, creating psychological distance between yourself and your own thoughts. The shift is subtle but transformative. Instead of, I'm going to fail, the practice becomes, I'm noticing the thought that I might fail. Instead of, everyone can tell I don't belong here, it becomes, I'm having the experience of believing people can tell I don't belong here. This isn't denial. It's recognition that thoughts are mental events, not facts. Your brain produces thousands of thoughts per day, many of which are completely inaccurate. Treating every thought as a reliable report on reality is like treating every dream as a literal prediction of the future. Alongside diffusion, you develop what might be called the evidence standard, the practice of demanding actual, specific evidence before accepting any negative self-assessment as valid. When the thought, I'm not qualified for this opportunity, arises, you ask, what specific evidence supports this claim? What specific evidence contradicts it? If I were evaluating someone else's qualifications objectively, what would I conclude? In the overwhelming majority of cases, you'll discover that the negative assessment has no real evidentiary basis. It's an emotional reaction, wearing the costume of rational analysis. And once you see it clearly for what it is, it loses its ability to control your behavior. The third element, self-compassion, is perhaps the most counterintuitive. Most high achievers are far harsher with themselves than they would ever dream of being with anyone they care about. They hold themselves to standards that would strike them as cruel and unrealistic if applied to a colleague or a friend. And they interpret every failure, every setback, every moment of falling short as definitive evidence of fundamental inadequacy. Self-compassion doesn't mean lowering your standards. It means applying the same basic human understanding to yourself that you extend to others, recognizing that error, setback, and imperfection are not aberrations in the learning process. They are the learning process. When self-doubt loses the fuel of self-cruelty, it becomes much smaller, not gone, but small enough to move through. The 4 dimensions of magnetic presence. Presence is the external expression of inner certainty. It is not a technique or a performance. It is the natural radiation of genuine confidence, competence, and self-awareness outward into social space. Most people conceptualize presence as something loud, something that takes up room, something aggressive or dominant. This is a fundamental misunderstanding. The most magnetic people in any room are almost always the quietest, not in terms of volume, but in terms of internal noise. They are not monitoring themselves, performing for approval, or managing an image. They are simply present, fully engaged with what is actually happening. That quality of engaged stillness is felt before a single word is spoken. Presence operates across 4 dimensions simultaneously. Physical. Presence. Your body is communicating constantly, independently of anything you say. The communication begins with your relationship to gravity. Most people hold chronic tension in their bodies, shoulders raised, jaw clenched, stomach contracted, chest pulled slightly inward. This is the postural signature of defensiveness, of vigilance, of someone who is at some level braced for threat. People read it immediately, below the threshold of conscious awareness, and they respond to it with a subtle but real reduction in trust and openness. Confident physical presence begins with surrender, allowing your shoulders to fall to their natural position, releasing the grip in your jaw, letting your breathing descend deep into your belly, allowing your weight to settle downward, creating the sensation of being rooted to the floor beneath you. This doesn't create good posture as an act of effort. It creates good posture as a consequence of relaxation, and the difference is visible. Eye contact is the 2nd dimension of physical presence. The most common mistakes are either avoiding it, which signals either fear or disinterest, or using it aggressively, which is a performance of dominance that signals insecurity just as reliably as avoidance does. Confident eye contact is warm and steady, not unblinking or intense, simply present. And the secret to achieving it effortlessly is this: when you are genuinely interested in another person, eye contact happens naturally. You stop thinking about whether you're making enough or too little eye contact because your attention is focused on the person rather than on your own performance. This principle, that genuine interest, eliminates the self-consciousness that creates awkward eye contact, generalizes across all of physical presence. When your attention is genuinely outward rather than inward, your body takes care of itself. Vocal presence. Your voice carries information about your internal state at a level of detail that is difficult to consciously control. Stress hormones change the tension in your vocal cords. They alter your breathing patterns, which changes your resonance. They influence your pace and your pitch in ways that listeners register, even if they couldn't explain what they're responding to. The foundation of vocal confidence is breath support. When you breathe deeply and allow breath to power your voice from the diaphragm, you create a richer, fuller sound that naturally carries authority. When stress causes breathing to become shallow and your voice to emerge from your throat, the sound becomes thinner and higher. Signals of anxiety that undermine your message regardless of its content. Pace matters enormously. People who are anxious tend to speak quickly, as if they're afraid of taking up too much time or space. The implicit message is apologetic. I'll get out of your way as fast as I can. Confident people speak at a measured pace. They allow pauses. They understand that silence, rather than undermining impact, creates it, giving weight to what precedes the pause and building anticipation for what follows. Emotional presence, the ability to remain stable, centered, calm, genuinely engaged, regardless of what is happening around you. This quality is extraordinarily rare in modern life and extraordinarily attractive. In a world where most people are reactive, easily destabilized, constantly oscillating between anxiety and relief based on what's happening outside them, a person who remains calm and grounded stands out with a force that requires no deliberate effort. This stability is not indifference. People with strong emotional presence care deeply about outcomes, about relationships, about the quality of their work. But their sense of self is not contingent on any particular outcome materializing. They can be fully invested and fully detached simultaneously, present to what is happening while unattached to any specific result. This is built through practice, meditation, mindfulness, and the systematic cultivation of the observer's perspective, the capacity to notice your emotional experience without being identical to it. Mental presence. The rarest and most powerful dimension, the quality of being fully, completely, entirely here. Not half here, while simultaneously rehearsing what you're about to say. Not physically present while mentally elsewhere, running predictions about how you're being perceived. Completely uncomplicatedly here. This quality, true presence of attention, creates a particular experience in the people you interact with. They feel genuinely heard, genuinely seen, genuinely valued. Not as props in your performance, not as audiences for your presentation of self, but as the actual focus of your genuine interest. When someone feels this from you, something shifts. They open, they trust, they lean in. They remember the interaction as exceptional without being able to say exactly why. Mental presence is developed through the same practices that develop emotional presence. Meditation, the discipline of returning attention to what is actually happening rather than to your thoughts about it, and the conscious, repeated choice to be interested in other people as they actually are, rather than as categories or obstacles. Social architecture, how to lead any room. Every social environment has a structure, an invisible architecture of influence, trust, and deference that determines who shapes interactions and who is shaped by them. Most people move through these structures without ever seeing them clearly. They respond to social dynamics without understanding the underlying mechanics. They find themselves repeatedly in familiar positions, whether dominant or subordinate, without understanding why. Social leadership is not about aggression, volume, or dominance. It's about understanding the architecture and consciously, skillfully participating in it. The foundation of everything is frame control. A frame is the interpretive context through which an interaction is understood. Every interaction takes place inside a frame, and the person whose frame prevails shapes the entire dynamic. Frames compete invisibly, constantly, in every human exchange. When someone interrupts you during a meeting, you have multiple available frames for that event. It could be disrespectful, it could be a sign of enthusiasm, it could be irrelevant. The frame you bring to that event determines your response, and your response reinforces or establishes the social reality going forward. People with strong frame control don't simply react to social events. They interpret them in ways that serve their purpose, not through denial or distortion, but through conscious choice about meaning. This shows up in the smallest details. When someone challenges a position you've taken, you can interpret that challenge as an attack that requires defense, or as engagement that invites discussion. The first interpretation creates defensiveness and signals insecurity. The second creates openness and signals confidence. Same event, different meaning, completely different dynamic. Strong frame control means maintaining your interpretation of events under social pressure, not rigidly but stably. Other people's emotional reactions, strong opinions, or attempts to establish dominance don't automatically shift your understanding of what is happening. You can consider new information without being destabilized by the emotional force with which it's delivered. Strategic communication. How you speak continuously broadcasts information about your internal state and social status. People who lack confidence tend to hedge everything. I might be wrong, but perhaps we could consider the possibility that this linguistic pattern signals uncertainty, seeks preemptive protection from being wrong, and invites others to dismiss what follows before hearing it. People with genuine confidence speak with precision and directness. They state positions without apology. They qualify when accuracy requires it, not when anxiety demands protection. They own their views while remaining genuinely open to new information that might change them. Tonality is equally important. The same words can carry completely different messages depending on the emotional quality beneath them. A tone of genuine interest communicates security and openness. A tone of defensiveness communicates threat. A tone of genuine warmth communicates connection. These qualities are not controlled by deciding to have them. They emerge from internal states, which is why all the work on internal states, the competence, the regulation, the presence, ultimately expresses itself through the voice. Timing is perhaps the most underappreciated element of powerful communication. Knowing when to speak, and equally when to be silent, is a master-level skill. Silence, used deliberately, carries extraordinary weight. It signals that you are not scrambling to fill space, that you are comfortable with pause, that what you say next will be intentional. In a world of anxious overcommunication, strategic silence stands out. Emotional independence. You cannot lead a room from a position of emotional dependence on the room's approval. This is not a philosophical principle. It's a practical constraint. If your internal state is contingent on others' reactions to you, then every frown, every skeptical expression, every moment of inattention immediately shifts your state. And your state is visible. And your visible state is interpreted by others as information about your confidence and capability. Genuine emotional independence means that you care deeply about people and about outcomes, while your sense of self remains stable, regardless of whether any particular outcome materializes or any particular person approves of you. You can receive criticism without becoming it. You can face disagreement without collapsing into it. This independence is what makes true leadership possible. People follow people who are stable, who are the same person under pressure as they are in comfort, who are not reshaped by every social wind. That stability communicates at the deepest level that this person can be relied upon. And reliance is the basis of all real social authority. Building bulletproof psychology. The world is not soft. Life will test you, not metaphorically, but concretely. Criticism, rejection, failure, people who want to diminish you, circumstances that seem designed to undermine your confidence. The question is not whether you will face these things, but whether your psychology is built to withstand them. Bulletproof psychology is not about becoming hard or closed. It's about becoming so structurally sound that adversity cannot compromise your foundation. The psychology of those who attack. This is the first and most important insight. People who attack, diminish, or attempt to undermine others are almost always operating from their own wound. Genuinely confident, genuinely secure people do not need to tear others down. They have no motivation to do so. They're building, creating, contributing, too engaged with their own forward movement to invest energy in dismantling someone else's. When someone attacks you, they reveal something about their own psychological state, not about your adequacy. Understanding this doesn't make bad behavior acceptable, but it strips the attack of its power to function as evidence. Someone's cruelty toward you is data about them. It is not data about you. Distinguishing signal from noise. Criticism comes in two fundamentally different forms, and treating them identically is a significant error. Constructive feedback is specific, actionable, and offered with genuine intention to improve. It points to something concrete. The opening of your presentation loses clarity around the third slide is information you can use. It is a signal. Destructive criticism is vague, personal, and offered to wound. "You're not really cut out for this" contains no information. It has no specific referent, no actionable content, no evidence. It is noise dressed as feedback. The practice of cognitive immunity is the disciplined application of one question to every critique you receive. Is this a signal or noise? If it's a signal, you extract the information, assess it honestly, and use what's valuable. If it's noise, you recognize it for what it is, an expression of someone else's internal state, and allow it to pass through you without lodging. Reframing adversity as strength training. The psychological muscle that makes you resilient grows in direct proportion to the resistance it encounters. This is not a metaphor. It is a neurological and psychological reality. Every difficult conversation you navigate, every failure you recover from, every moment of genuine discomfort you move through, without retreat is literally building the neural structures and psychological patterns that make the next difficulty easier to handle. This transforms the way you relate to adversity. Instead of experiencing challenges as costs, as painful experiences you endure on your way to somewhere better, you begin to experience them as investments. Each one is purchasing something real. Greater resilience, greater capability, greater confidence in your ability to handle whatever comes next. The discipline is developing this perspective before adversity arrives, so that it's available in the moment rather than assembled afterward. People who have built bulletproof psychology don't move through difficult experiences hoping to learn something from them in retrospect. They encounter difficulty already oriented toward extraction, already asking, "What is this building in me?" Diversifying self-worth. The most psychologically fragile people are those who have concentrated all their self-worth in one or two domains. When that domain comes under threat, their entire sense of self comes under threat. Bulletproof psychology requires distributing your sense of worth across many sources. The quality of your character, your commitment to your values, your relationships, your contribution to others, your ongoing growth, your daily effort, regardless of daily results. When one source faces difficulty, the others sustain you. You are not a single pillar that falls when hit. You are a foundation built from many interlocking elements, each of which supports the whole. Performing under pressure. Everything we have discussed converges here. This is the test, the presentation where everything is on the line, the negotiation where the stakes are higher than anything you've faced before, the conversation that will define the relationship, the moment where your psychology either holds or it doesn't. High pressure does not create weakness, it reveals it, and, this is the insight that changes everything, it also reveals strength in those who have built it. The physiology of pressure is predictable. Stress hormones flood the system. Heart rate rises. Breathing becomes shallow. The prefrontal cortex begins to go offline. For most people, this cascade impairs performance. For those who understand it and have prepared for it, it enhances performance. The difference is not the intensity of the physiological response. It's the interpretation of that response. Reframing arousal. The sensations of anxiety and excitement are physiologically identical. Increased heart rate, heightened alertness, elevated energy, sharpened focus. The only difference is the story you attach to those sensations. I'm scared orients you toward escape. I'm ready orients you toward engagement. Both can accompany an identical internal experience. This reframe is not denial. It's not telling yourself something false. It's recognizing that the body's preparation response is genuinely ambiguous, and choosing the interpretation that serves performance rather than sabotaging it. Athletes who perform at the highest levels understand this intuitively. They have learned to want the feeling of pressure because they've experienced what it can produce when it's directed rather than suppressed. Preparation. That actually works. Most people prepare by memorizing specific, Words, specific responses to anticipated questions, specific scripts for anticipated scenarios. This creates a kind of brittle readiness, confidence that depends on things going according to plan. When things don't go according to plan, and they rarely do, not exactly, memorized preparation evaporates. You're left looking for your script in an environment that has departed from the script. Genuine preparation builds adaptive capability. Instead of preparing to handle the specific situation you expect, you prepare to handle any situation. You become so deeply familiar with your domain that you can speak about it from any angle, respond to any question, recover from any disruption. The goal is not to be ready for the expected. It's to be confident in your ability to handle the unexpected. This type of preparation builds something psychologists call self-efficacy. Not confidence that this specific thing will go well, but confidence in your ability to navigate whatever actually happens. It cannot be disrupted by surprise because it doesn't depend on circumstances being controlled. The role of breath in high-stakes performance. When pressure arrives, your breathing changes first. It becomes fast and shallow, which activates the stress response, which further disrupts breathing. A cycle that quickly becomes the physiological expression of panic. Breaking this cycle with conscious breath control is the single most immediate and reliable tool available in high-stakes moments. 4 counts in, hold for 4. 6 counts out, repeat. The extended exhale activates the parasympathetic nervous system within seconds, not minutes, seconds. In meetings, in negotiations, in presentations, in every high-pressure context, this one practice, available to anyone, requiring no equipment, no preparation, no special circumstances, can shift the neurological state from impairment to clarity within a single minute. The architecture of unshakable self-worth. Here is the deepest truth about confidence. It cannot be built on anything that can be taken away. Achievements can disappear. Status can disappear. Approval can disappear. Relationships can disappear. Health can disappear. Any confidence that depends on these things is only as stable as the things it depends on, which means it is not stable at all. Genuine, unshakable self-worth is built on a foundation that cannot be removed from beneath you. Your identity, your values, your relationship with your own humanity. Separating identity from results. You are not your job title. You are not your bank balance. You are not your social recognition, your number of followers, your academic credentials, your relationship status, or the opinions of people whose names you may not even know. You are something prior to all of those things, something that persists when all of those things change. Outcome independence is the psychological skill of caring deeply about your results while not deriving your identity from them. You can be deeply invested in a project without your sense of self being hostage to its success. You can want a particular outcome passionately while remaining internally stable if it doesn't materialize. This is not detachment. It is the much harder work of holding full investment and full stability simultaneously. Unconditional self-acceptance. Most people practice conditional self-acceptance. I am acceptable when I'm performing well, when I'm living up to my standards, when I'm making progress, when I'm not making mistakes. This creates a relationship with yourself that is permanently conditional, permanently precarious. The moment performance dips or standards aren't met, or a mistake occurs, the foundation shifts. Unconditional self-acceptance means accepting yourself completely, including the limitations, the failures, the aspects of yourself that fall short of your ideals, not because you're satisfied with mediocrity, but because the only psychologically durable foundation is one that doesn't exclude part of you. Growth requires honesty about where you are, Honesty requires safety. Safety requires acceptance. This is not a contradiction. It is the actual sequence of lasting development. Living from values. Core values are the principles that make you most fully yourself. When your behavior aligns with them, you feel the particular kind of confidence that no external circumstance can undermine. The confidence of integrity, of living according to what actually matters to you. When you violate your values, even in ways others might never notice, you erode the foundation of genuine self-worth. Something shifts internally. It may be subtle, but it's real. Identifying your values requires uncommon honesty, not about what you think should matter, not about what your family or culture tells you ought to matter, but about what actually generates the deepest satisfaction in your lived experience. What choices leave you feeling most like yourself? What compromises cost you the most? Those answers reveal what your values actually are. Build your life in alignment with those answers, and you have a source of confidence that is genuinely independent of the world's opinion of you. Mental bulletproofing. The final layer. The final stage of building limitless confidence is also the deepest, the construction of a psychological architecture so robust that nothing can compromise its fundamental structure. This does not mean immunity from pain, disappointment, or difficulty. It means that difficulty, when it comes, does not reach the foundation. The surface may be struck and hard, but the core holds. Psychological flexibility. Rigid psychological structures fail under sufficient pressure. Brittle confidence, the kind that depends on things going a particular way, on circumstances being a particular shape, on people responding in particular patterns, shatters when the world doesn't cooperate. Flexible confidence is something entirely different. It doesn't depend on the world being cooperative. It adapts. When one approach fails, it shifts to another without losing stability. When circumstances change, it adjusts without losing direction. When new information arrives that contradicts current assumptions, it integrates that information without collapsing. This flexibility is not weakness. It's the quality that makes genuine strength possible. The oak that can't bend breaks. The reed that bends survives. Stress tolerance. The capacity to maintain clear thinking and effective behavior under increasingly difficult conditions is not a fixed trait. It is a skill that is built through progressive exposure to difficulty. Small stresses met and navigated expand capacity. Slightly larger stresses met and navigated expand it further. This process, repeated consistently over time, creates the kind of psychological resilience that turns situations that used to be overwhelming into merely challenging and situations that used to be merely challenging into routine. Learned optimism, not the naive positivity of someone who refuses to see difficulty, but the evidence-based expectation of someone who has watched themselves navigate difficulty repeatedly and emerge capable. When setbacks occur, learned optimism interprets them as specific and temporary rather than global and permanent. This didn't work rather than I don't work. This is difficult right now rather than this will always be difficult. These are not illusions. They are accurate probability assessments based on the actual pattern of how things tend to work over time for people who continue trying. Philosophical confidence. The deepest form of unshakable confidence is knowing who you are and what you stand for clearly enough that the opinions of the world, however forcefully expressed, cannot redefine you. When you have a clear, honestly arrived-at sense of your own values, your own priorities, your own understanding of what a meaningful life looks like, you have something that cannot be taken away by trend, by criticism, or by changing circumstance. You have an internal compass. People without that compass drift. Every strong wind moves them. Every forceful personality shapes them. Every new piece of cultural input potentially redefines them. This is not freedom. It is the most complete kind of dependence. People with that compass, who have done the genuine philosophical work of knowing what they believe and why, maintain their direction through difficulty in a way that nothing external can replicate. The science of human influence. The highest level of social confidence is understanding human psychology deeply enough to navigate any interaction with precision, to know what is actually happening beneath the surface of what is being said, and to respond to the real dynamics rather than only to the surface ones. Every human being, regardless of background, culture, or personality, is driven by a small set of fundamental psychological needs. Understanding these needs gives you an extraordinary ability to read situations accurately and respond effectively. The need for significance. Every person needs to feel that they matter, that their presence registers, that their perspective has weight, that they are seen and recognized as a full human being rather than as a background element. This need drives more behavior than almost any other force in human interaction. People will go to remarkable lengths for significance, will make poor decisions, take unnecessary risks, create unnecessary conflict, simply to avoid the feeling of invisibility. Understanding this need doesn't mean flattering people or pretending they're more impressive than they are. It means bringing genuine attention and genuine interest, making them feel that the interaction is specifically about them, not about your performance, not about your agenda, but about genuine engagement with who they are. When people feel genuinely seen by you, they trust you. That trust is the currency of all real influence. The need for certainty. Human beings are uncomfortable with ambiguity, with open-ended situations, with unclear outcomes. This discomfort is not weakness, it's hardwired. The brain's threat detection system responds to uncertainty similarly to how it responds to known threats. This creates a predictable dynamic. In any situation characterized by uncertainty or confusion, people naturally orient toward whoever is projecting clarity and calm. Not necessarily whoever has the most information, but whoever is communicating with the most grounded confidence about how to move forward. When you can be the person in uncertain situations who says, "Here's how I'm thinking about this. Here's what I think we should do. Here's why I believe this approach will work," without performing certainty you don't have, but from the genuine place of someone who trusts their ability to navigate complexity, people follow. Not because you've convinced them intellectually, because you've provided what their nervous system was seeking. The need for connection is not small talk. It is the felt sense of being genuinely understood by another person, of having your actual experience recognized rather than merely your surface presentation. Creating genuine connection is largely a function of the quality of attention you bring. When you are truly present with someone, not half present while tracking your own performance, but genuinely oriented toward understanding their experience, they feel it immediately. The need for growth and contribution. People need to feel that they are moving forward and that they are contributing to something that extends beyond themselves. These are not luxuries. They are fundamental psychological requirements. When you can be someone who helps others develop, who creates opportunities for meaningful contribution, who supports the forward movement of the people around you, you become genuinely, durably influential, not through power or position, but through the deep pull of being associated with growth. Building unstoppable momentum. Confidence is not just how you feel in individual moments. It is the cumulative product of how you have been living across many moments, many days, many years. Momentum, the sustained forward movement that carries you through difficulty toward your goals, is the practical expression of confidence in action. And like confidence itself, It is not a feeling that arrives and departs unpredictably. It is the result of specific practices consistently maintained. The psychology of consistency. Your brain is a pattern recognition machine that draws conclusions about who you are based on what you repeatedly do. When you consistently do what you say you will do, when you keep the commitments you make to yourself, however small, your brain updates its model of you. You become, in your own internal representation, someone who follows through. And that updated self-model generates confidence far more durably than any achievement. Conversely, when you repeatedly break commitments to yourself, even small ones, even private ones, your brain registers those breaks. It updates its model accordingly, and the person in that model, over time, becomes someone who doesn't fully trust themselves. The most important commitments you keep are the smallest ones, not because small wins matter in themselves, but because each small win is a brick in the foundation of self-trust. Marginal gains and compounding. The most durable momentum is not built through dramatic reinvention. It's built through small, consistent improvements that compound over time. 20 minutes of focused learning every day becomes over 120 hours in a year. One difficult conversation per week that you would previously have avoided becomes over 50 navigated challenges in a year. One small physical improvement per week compares to 52 improvements over a year. The arithmetic is unremarkable. The compounding is extraordinary, because each improvement doesn't just add, it multiplies. Each competency you build makes adjacent competencies easier to develop. Each challenge you navigate successfully makes the next challenge slightly less intimidating. Each commitment you keep makes the next commitment slightly more automatic. Positive feedback loops. The goal of momentum mastery is to create self-reinforcing cycles, positive actions that generate positive outcomes that motivate further positive actions. The specific loops vary by person and context, but the structure is universal. Learning to competence, to confidence, to willingness to attempt more challenging things leads to greater learning. Exercise leads to improved energy, leads to improved performance, leads to improved self-image, leads to greater motivation to exercise. Genuine engagement with people to deeper relationships, to greater sense of belonging, to greater willingness to engage genuinely. Identify the loops available in your life, the activities that generate multiple benefits simultaneously, that create conditions for their own continuation, and invest there. The returns compound in ways that are difficult to anticipate from the starting position. Energy architecture momentum requires energy, not inspiration, which is sporadic and unreliable, but the consistent availability of the different forms of energy that different tasks demand. Physical energy comes from sleep, from movement, from the basic inputs that your body requires to function at its best. These are not optional accessories to high performance. They are its prerequisites. Mental energy, the capacity for focused, creative, complex thinking, requires periods of rest and recovery, not just periods of application. The brain is not a machine that performs equally at all hours under all conditions. It has rhythms, and working with those rhythms rather than against them produces dramatically better results. Emotional energy, the capacity for genuine engagement, for care, for the quality of presence that makes relationships generative, is depleted by conflict, inauthenticity, and environments that demand performance of a self you don't recognize. It is replenished by genuine connection, by work that feels meaningful, and by the experience of living in alignment with your actual values. Design your life, to whatever extent you can, so that your most important work meets your best energy. This is not a luxury. It's the structural condition for sustained momentum. Climbing the confidence hierarchy. Every human environment has a hierarchy. Not the official one, the org chart, the title structure, the formal designations of authority. The real one, the invisible architecture of who is actually trusted, who is actually followed, who actually shapes what happens in a given space. Understanding this architecture and understanding how to position yourself authentically within it is essential for anyone who wants to maximize their contribution and their influence. Genuine competence. This is the foundation. In every hierarchy, people ultimately defer to those who demonstrably know what they're doing. Not those who claim to know. Anyone can claim anything. But those whose actions, judgments, and results reveal genuine expertise. Building competence is not about becoming a generalist who knows a little about everything. It's about developing focused depth in the areas that matter in your specific context to a level where your capability is unmistakable and undeniable. Authentic confidence. Competence without confidence is invisible. Extraordinarily capable people regularly fail to realize their potential because they haven't developed the ability to communicate that capability clearly and compellingly to occupy the space their ability has earned. Authentic confidence is not about promoting yourself. It's about being fully present with what you've actually built. About speaking your perspective without the protective hedging of someone afraid of being wrong. About occupying space. Physical space, conversational space, professional space, as if you belong there. Because you do. Social intelligence. This is where technical experts most often hit ceilings. They develop tremendous competence and genuine confidence in their domain, then find that progress requires skills they haven't developed. Reading people accurately, building trust across personality differences, navigating conflict productively, facilitating the kind of conversation in which good decisions actually emerge. Social intelligence is learnable. It's built through the same mechanisms as any other competency: deliberate attention, focused practice, honest feedback. But it requires a different kind of attention, outward rather than inward, focused on the experience of others rather than on the quality of your own performance. Leadership. Ability. Leadership is not a position, it's a quality of relationship, the willingness to take responsibility for outcomes larger than yourself, to make decisions under uncertainty, to maintain direction and stability for others during periods of confusion and difficulty. Leadership is available to anyone willing to step into that relationship, regardless of title, regardless of seniority, regardless of formal authority, and it is recognized instantly by everyone when it appears. Something in people orients toward genuine leadership as reliably as a compass needle orients north. Presence and charisma. The highest level of the confidence hierarchy is not achieved through any specific technique or strategy. It emerges from the integration of everything below it: genuine competence, authentic confidence, deep social intelligence, proven leadership, combined with the kind of self-knowledge that only genuine inner work produces. When all of these elements are in place, something becomes visible that cannot be manufactured or replicated: the quality of someone who is entirely, authentically themselves. Not performing, not managing, simply present, capable, and genuinely oriented toward contribution. That quality is what we call charisma. And while we tend to treat it as a gift some people are born with, it is, in fact, the natural expression of someone who has done the sustained work of becoming who they actually are. Fear alchemy, turning terror into power. Fear is not your enemy. This is perhaps the most important reframe in this entire book, because your relationship with fear determines, more than almost anything else, the scope of the life you will live. If fear is your enemy, then the presence of fear is a signal to retreat, to avoid, to protect. And since growth always exists at the edge of comfort, this means that every time you face a genuine opportunity for expansion, your own psychology is working against it. If fear is information, if it is data about what matters, energy available for performance, a compass pointing toward your greatest unrealized potential, then its presence becomes an invitation rather than a warning. Fear as information, fear arises when something important is at stake. This is not an accident, it is a feature. The things that frighten you most are almost always the things that, if pursued, would have the most significant, positive impact on your life. The difficult conversation you've been avoiding, the professional opportunity you keep talking yourself out of, the relationship you want to build but haven't risked approaching. Fear is pointing directly at the places where your greatest growth is available. Fear as energy, the physiological preparation response that we call fear, the elevated heart rate, the heightened alertness, the surge of energy, is the same preparation response that enhances athletic performance, sharpens cognitive focus, and produces extraordinary output under pressure. The difference between fear that paralyzes and energy that propels is not the intensity of the experience. It is the interpretation. "I'm overwhelmed, and this might go badly," produces one behavioral trajectory. "I'm activated and ready for what's coming," produces a completely different one. This reframe is not magical thinking. It is the deliberate, practiced application of cognitive neuroscience. Your interpretation of your physiological state influences your subsequent physiological state in measurable, real ways. The progressive exposure process. Sustainable courage is built incrementally. Begin at the edge of your current comfort zone, not in the terror zone, not safely inside the familiar. In the productive discomfort zone, where the challenge is real but not overwhelming. Navigate that challenge. Extract the learning. Expand the boundary slightly. Repeat. This process does two things simultaneously. It builds genuine capability at each level so that confidence is always grounded in something real. And it trains your nervous system to accurately assess the true level of threat present in challenging situations, replacing the ancient, up-calibrated threat response with a more accurate current assessment. Purpose as the master override. The single most powerful dissolvent of paralyzing fear is a sufficiently compelling purpose. When the reason you're taking action extends beyond your personal comfort, safety, or image, when you're showing up for something that genuinely matters, for people you genuinely care about, for a contribution that has meaning beyond your own interests, fear becomes secondary in a way that no amount of self-directed courage work can reliably achieve. This is not abstract. The parent who is terrified of heights finds themselves climbing to reach their child. The person who is socially anxious finds themselves speaking in public when the cause is one they care about deeply enough. The person who fears failure finds themselves attempting things they've never attempted before when the stakes are large enough. Find the purposes that are large enough to make your personal fears small by comparison. That is the deepest source of sustainable courage. The complete transformation, becoming unrecognizably confident. Everything in this book has been leading here. Not to a moment of inspiration that fades, not to a temporary performance of a different self, to an actual, durable, irreversible transformation, the kind that people who knew you before will find difficult to fully account for. When these principles are genuinely implemented, the transformation happens simultaneously across every dimension of your life. The psychological shift. Your internal dialogue changes, not because you've worked on positive thinking, but because the evidence base has changed. You have built genuine competence in areas that matter. You have navigated real challenges. You have kept commitments to yourself. You have moved through fear and come out capable on the other side. Your subconscious has updated its assessment based on actual data, and that updated assessment expresses itself as a different quality of inner voice, not one that demands validation from the world, but one that already knows something about its own capability. Your relationship with failure changes. You don't stop failing. Anyone alive and genuinely engaged with difficulty continues to fail. But failure stops meaning what it used to mean. It becomes information rather than indictment, feedback rather than verdict, a component of the learning process rather than evidence that you don't belong. Your relationship with others' opinions changes, not from indifference. You remain genuinely interested in genuine feedback, but from the psychological shift that happens when approval is something you appreciate rather than something you require. The behavioral shift actions that were previously impossible become natural, not easy necessarily, but natural. The difficult conversation you used to avoid for weeks, you have within a day. The opportunity you used to talk yourself out of, you pursue. The space you used to vacate when you felt pressure, you hold. Your communication transforms, not because you've memorized new scripts, but because the internal reality that communication expresses has changed. You speak with the directness of someone who trusts their own perspective. You listen with the presence of someone who doesn't need to be performing while they listen. You ask for what you need with the ease of someone who has separated the request from their self-worth. The social shift. Some relationships improve dramatically as you bring greater presence, clearer communication, and more honest boundaries to them. Some end because they were built around a dynamic that your transformation has made unavailable. New relationships form with different qualities, with people who are similarly engaged with their own growth, who bring capability and groundedness rather than need and dependency, who relate to you as an equal rather than as someone to be managed or appeased. Your professional world reorganizes. Opportunities that were previously invisible begin to become visible. Not because the world has changed, but because your ability to recognize and pursue them has. The physical shift, the body, carries psychological reality. When the internal architecture changes, the external presentation changes with it. You move differently, with the particularity and economy of someone who is entirely at home in their own skin. You occupy space without apology and without performance. The chronic tension that held defensive posture in place releases. Your sleep improves. Your energy improves. The particular exhaustion of constant self-management and self-monitoring lifts, freeing enormous resources for actual engagement with your life. The ongoing work transformation is not a destination you arrive at and then inhabit without effort. It is a practice, one that becomes more natural over time, but never ceases to require investment. You continue to seek situations that stretch you. Comfort is a pleasant byproduct of growth, not its goal. When you find yourself becoming comfortable with something that once challenged you, that is your signal to find a new edge. You continue to invest in genuine competence in the areas that matter most to you. The trajectory of continuous development is itself a source of confidence, not because of where you currently are, but because of the evidence it provides about your capacity for becoming. You continue to live from your values, to make choices that align with what you actually believe rather than what is expedient, popular, or comfortable. That alignment is the structural condition for the kind of self-respect that no external circumstance can undermine. The larger purpose, the ultimate expression of limitless confidence, is not what it allows you to achieve for yourself. It is what it allows you to contribute. A person with genuine inner certainty, who is not operating from need or fear or the requirement for constant external validation, is free to be genuinely useful, to make decisions based on what will actually serve the situation rather than what will protect their image, to take unpopular positions when those positions are true, to invest in others without keeping score, to show up fully in a world that desperately needs people who can. The confident person who becomes most powerful is not the one whose confidence allows them to win more. It's the one whose confidence allows them to give more, to bring their full capability, their full presence, their full honesty to every interaction and every endeavor in service of something larger than themselves. This is what it means to take control of your life with limitless confidence, not to need less from the world, but to have so much that you can finally afford to give.